DBAM came into existence in 1991 as the street and creek arm of the Klansmen Confraternity, a group formerly known as the Eternal Fraternal Order of the Legion Consortium. In the language of the Klansmen, DBAM was a phrase meaning be strong, a name meant to inspire courage and loyalty among its members. The roots of DBAM trace back to 1983, when 5 students at the University of Calabar in Cross River State came together to form what would become the Klansmen Confraternity. In its earliest days, the organization was largely campus-based, existing primarily among students and graduates. However, by the early 1990s, the leadership decided to create an extension that would operate entirely on the streets, made up of individuals who had never attended a university or any tertiary institution. This new arm was DBAM, and it became a bridge between the academic circle of the Klansmen and the realities of life on the streets. The very first leader of DBAM was a man named Terika, but he was far better known by his street name, Acasian Boy. Within the DBAM hierarchy, however, he held an even more commanding title, Titan the Great, or sometimes Titan the Giant. Under his leadership, DBAM began to grow rapidly, establishing its own system of ranks, codes, and operations. Although DBAM members did not share the academic background of their Klansmen counterparts, the two branches were closely linked and worked hand in hand. The Klansmen operated primarily in educational institutions, while DBAM dominated life outside the campus walls, in the neighborhoods, creeks, and bustling street corners of cities like Port Harcourt. This alliance gave the overall organization a broader reach, blending intellectual influence with street-level strength. In the early years of its formation, DBAM quickly became a significant force on the streets of Port Harcourt. They enjoyed a strong leadership structure, which allowed them to organize themselves better than many of their rivals at the time, particularly their long-standing opponents, a group known as DBAM. In those early days, DBAM controlled more areas and had more influence than DBAM. However, dominance on the streets was never guaranteed. Although DBAM had the manpower and the organization to take over territories, holding on to them proved to be another challenge entirely. Over time, their control began to weaken. The main reason was not a lack of determination, but a shortage of resources. Without strong financial backing, DBAM struggled to defend the areas they had taken, especially as the pressure from DBAM and another emerging rival, the Icelanders, began to mount. As these rival groups grew bolder and more aggressive, DBAM found themselves in an increasingly difficult battle to maintain their stronghold. Despite these challenges, their early history cemented their name as one of the most recognized street factions in the region, a group born out of a university confraternity but built to survive in the unpredictable, high-stakes world beyond the campus gates. The Icelanders and DBAM were the street branches of the Supreme Vikings Confraternity, a powerful organization with deep roots in both the creeks and urban centers of the Niger Delta. Unlike DBAM, these two groups enjoyed stronger financial support. Behind them stood politicians, wealthy business figures, and other influential sponsors who were loyal to the Supreme Vikings Confraternity. This backing gave them access to resources, logistics, and weapons that made them more capable of defending and expanding their territories. With this advantage, the Icelanders and DBAM began to push beyond their boundaries, targeting areas that had once been firmly under DBAM control. Bit by bit, they captured communities and neighborhoods that had previously been dominated by DBAM, tilting the balance of power in their favor. At the head of DBAM during these turbulent years was their first and most notable leader, Terika, widely known by his street name, Acasian Boy. Born and raised in Bukuma, a riverine settlement in the Dee-Bam local government area of River State, Acasian Boy had risen to leadership through his boldness, charisma, and ability to rally men around a cause. Under his command, DBAM experienced a surge in membership, drawing young men from across the creeks and streets who saw in him a leader worth following. One of the most defining moments of his leadership came on October 9, 2003. The small but strategically important community of Tombia had once been under DBAM's control, but had fallen into the hands of their rivals, the Icelanders and DBAM. At that time, the Icelanders were being led by a man whose name carried weight across the Niger Delta, Ateke Tom. Determined to reclaim what had been lost, Acasian Boy assembled scores of his most loyal DBAM fighters. It was not just a mission to take back territory, it was a matter of pride and a statement of strength. The group moved into Tombia in a well-coordinated push, confronting the Icelanders and DBAM forces in what would become one of the most talked about street battles in the region's history. The fighting was intense, and the sound of it carried far beyond the waterfront. For hours, neither side gave way. Acasian Boy was at the forefront, leading from the front lines rather than commanding from the rear. However, in the thick of the battle, tragedy struck. During an exchange, Acasian Boy was fatally shot by members of the Icelanders under Ateke Tom's leadership. His fall sent shockwaves through Dee-Bam ranks. Despite the devastating loss of their leader, accounts from that day suggest that Dee-Bam eventually gained the upper hand, forcing the Icelanders and Dewell to retreat. By the end of the confrontation, Ateke Tom and his men withdrew from Tombia entirely, relocating their base elsewhere. For Dee-Bam, the recapture of Tombia came at a heavy cost. They had reclaimed their ground, but the price was the life of the man who had built their strength from the ground up. Acasian Boy's death left a deep scar on the organization, but his legacy lived on in the loyalty of those he had led and the battles they continued to fight in his name. After the fall of Acasian Boy, the leadership of Dee-Bam passed into the hands of Kingsley Akogu, a man better known on the streets by his nickname, King. From the very start, King's reign was marked by unrelenting conflict. He was not the kind of leader to back down or seek compromise. Instead, he was fiercely territorial and believed that strength was proven through dominance. Under his command, Dee-Bam plunged into a period of almost constant battles, most of them against their long-standing rivals, the Icelanders. King was a bold figure, feared and respected in equal measure. His leadership style was aggressive, and he demanded absolute loyalty from his men. Wherever the Icelanders gained a foothold, King would launch swift counterattacks, often leading his fighters personally into the fray. These repeated clashes made the streets tense, with both groups locked in a cycle of attack and retaliation. However, King's fearless nature and unwillingness to bend also made him many enemies, not only among rival groups, but even within powerful circles. It was widely whispered that certain senior figures in the Supreme Vikings confraternity, some of whom had strong political connections, saw King as a problem. His refusal to take instructions, his stubborn control over his territories, and his unpredictable nature made him difficult to manage. According to allegations, these senior figures decided that the easiest way to remove him was to work with security forces. One day, security operatives received a tip-off about King's whereabouts. The information claimed he was hiding in a particular part of Port Harcourt. Acting on the lead, they moved quickly, closing in on the location. The spot turned out to be a brothel in the city. King was reportedly inside when the operatives arrived. He was captured on the spot and taken away. Later, he was brought to another location, often referred to as the city brothel area, where he met his end. With King gone, Dee-Bam once again faced a leadership vacuum. This time, the man who rose to fill it was known as Angel. Angel's rise, however, came during a time when the group's situation had changed dramatically. Even before he took charge, the state government had already placed Dee-Bam under heavy pressure. They were being targeted alongside other armed groups, including the well-known militant organization led by Asari Dokubo. This government estrangement meant constant surveillance, crackdowns, and restrictions on movement. For Dee-Bam, it was a new kind of war, not just against rival groups, but against the authorities themselves. The challenges Angel inherited were far greater than those faced by his predecessors, and the path forward for the group was uncertain. When Angel took over as leader of Dee-Bam, the group found itself in one of the most turbulent chapters of its history. The rivalry with the Icelanders, led by the influential Ateke Tom, was still fierce, but the challenges went beyond street battles. The Dee-Bam leadership believed they were facing a coordinated effort to push them out of their strongholds, not just from rival groups, but also from forces far more powerful. Angel was strategic and understood the value of alliances. Under his leadership, Dee-Bam formed a partnership with the Niger Delta People's Volunteer Force, the militant group led by the fiery and outspoken Asari Dokubo. This was not a casual alliance, it was a calculated move. Both groups shared a common enemy in the Icelanders, and they also shared similar grievances about how the state's politics were shaping the balance of power in the region. Together, Angel and Asari Dokubo's forces openly accused the state government of giving support, whether openly or behind the scenes, to Ateke Tom's Icelanders. They claimed that the authorities were showing favoritism by siding with the Icelanders in disputes, while at the same time marginalizing Dee-Bam and their allies. According to their account, this alleged bias was not just about politics, it was about control of land, waterways, and the revenue that came with them. These tensions escalated over time. From Dee-Bam's point of view, every move by the government and its security agencies seemed designed to weaken them. Communities that had once been open to them began to close their gates under pressure from the authorities. The accusations grew louder. They believed the state was intentionally forcing them out of River State, piece by piece, using both political influence and military pressure. The partnership with Asari Dokubo brought temporary strength. Dee-Bam fighters joined forces with militants from the Creeks, creating a united front that made them more difficult to attack. For about a year, this alliance held, allowing them to mount stronger resistance against the Icelanders and hold on to key areas. But the combined pressure from rival groups and the government-backed security forces never stopped building. The turning point came in June 2004. That month, the military launched a major operation in Ogbakiri, a riverine community known for being a stronghold of Dee-Bam influence. Soldiers arrived in large numbers, moving in swiftly and decisively. The operation was described as an invasion, sudden, overwhelming, and aimed at breaking the group's hold on the area once and for all. In the chaos of the military push, Angel, the man who had led Dee-Bam through one of its most politically charged periods, was killed. His force sent ripples across the creeks and streets of River State. For Dee-Bam, it was the second time in just a short span of years that they had lost a leader in the middle of their fight. Angel's death marked the end of an era for the group. His alliance with Asari Dokubo had been bold, but it had also made him a bigger target. The events at Ogbakiri in June 2004 would be remembered not just as the loss of a leader, but as a sign of how deeply politics, rivalry, and government force were intertwined in the battles for control of the Niger Delta's communities.